The date is August 29th, 1988. Inside the suffocating, humid crucible of Madison Square Garden, 20,000 screaming fans are witnessing the absolute apex of the World Wrestling Federation's golden era. In the center of the ring, Aurelian Smith Jr., known to this captivated world as Jake the Snake Roberts, stalks his prey. His opponent, the muscular powerhouse Hercules, is spent. With a sudden, explosive burst of kinetic energy, Jake hooks the head, drops his weight, and drives Hercules' skull first into the mat with the devastating finality of the DDT. The garden erupts, but the true theater is just beginning. Jake unzips his notorious canvas sack, pulls out Damien, a massive Burmese python, and drapes the constrictor across the prone chest of his defeated foe. Standing over the wreckage, Jake doesn't yell. He simply glares into the camera with piercing, unblinking eyes, radiating an icy, intellectual menace that no one in professional wrestling has ever quite replicated. He is a dark, captivating, and deeply beloved force within the World Wrestling Federation, operating at the absolute peak of his powers. Yet few of the 20,000 people in that building, and few of the millions watching at home, understood the horrific truth behind the image. The calculated cruelty, the comfort with predators, the ease with which Jake Roberts navigated the shadows. These were not gimmicks. They were forged in a real-life house of horrors. A sanitized, televised echo of wrestling's most genuinely fractured family. This is that story. And it begins not with Jake, but with his father. Aurelian Grizzly Smith was, by the standards of his era, a respected figure in the wrestling business. At 6 feet 10 inches and 350 pounds, he was an imposing tag team performer who sold out arenas across America throughout the 1960s. Later, after his ring career ended, he became a trusted backstage agent, a road manager, someone the industry relied upon. To the outside world, he was a wrestling man through and through. Behind closed doors, he was something else entirely. Jake Roberts has stated on record, in the documentary Beyond the Mat, and in numerous interviews across decades, that he was conceived through an act of abuse committed by his father against his grandmother's 13-year-old daughter. That girl was Jake's mother. Grizzly Smith left her shortly after, carrying almost nothing with him and leaving almost nothing behind. Jake was raised by his grandmother. When she died in 1966, he was 11 years old, and he was sent to live with his father and his father's new wife. What followed were years of abuse at the hands of his stepmother, abuse that Jake has described in unflinching terms in public. He was a child in a house that offered no safety and no protection, and the man who should have been his protector was either absent, indifferent, or complicit. But Grizzly Smith did not confine his monstrous behavior to Jake's branch of the family tree. He had other children, and those children would each carry the same wounds into the same industry, onto the same television screens and the same pay-per-views as their half-brother, without most fans ever understanding what connected them. Michael Smith became Sam Houston, a babyface cowboy who worked for the World Wrestling Federation from 1987 to 1991. Robin Smith became Rockin' Robin, who held the Women's Championship in 1988. And by the late 1980s, all three of Grizzly Smith's children, Jake, Sam, and Robin, were on Federation television simultaneously, performing under the same corporate banner, sometimes appearing on the same cards. The cameras never lingered on the connection. The announcers rarely mentioned it. What the audience did not know was that Robin, Rockin' Robin, the women's champion, smiling on Federation television, had been abused by her father beginning at the age of 6 or 7, continuing until she was 14. She has stated that she was forced to threaten Grizzly Smith with his own gun before the abuse finally stopped. She told her mother. They left. The abuse toward Robin ended, but the damage persisted, as it always does. There was also a daughter, Jo Lynn, who disappeared, kidnapped, murdered. A former wrestling promoter later wrote that suspicion, never proven, had fallen on Grizzly Smith himself. The family rarely discussed it. It became another wound sealed over by silence. Into all of this walked Jake Roberts, carrying every bit of it with him, and transmuting it, through the only language he knew, into something the world had never seen before. He entered the wrestling business in 1974 in Louisiana, working as a referee before transitioning to the ring. The early years were an arduous nomadic grind through Mid-South, the Mid-Atlantic, and Stampede Wrestling, where he feuded with Big Daddy Ritter, later known as the Junkyard Dog. By 1983, the pieces clicked in Georgia Championship Wrestling, where he joined the Legion of Doom and feuded with Ron Garvin. He traveled to World Class Championship Wrestling, joining forces with Chris Adams and Gino Hernandez against the Von Erichs. Yet despite pulling the biggest crowd reactions in Mid-South Wrestling in 1985, management informed him he was considered nothing more than the number 5 babyface, leading Jake to pack his bags for a bigger stage. When he debuted in the World Wrestling Federation on March 8, 1986, he brought something entirely new to Vince McMahon's expanding empire. His first true masterpiece came in May 1986 against Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. On a nationally televised Saturday night's main event, Jake executed the DDT on the exposed concrete floor, right in front of Steamboat's wife at ringside. The move was executed in the most visceral way possible. Steamboat's head struck the concrete. He was rendered genuinely unconscious. And when Jake draped Damien over the lifeless body, the line between fiction and terrifying reality blurred completely. This was not performance. This was something else. The crowd felt it and could not explain why. The Federation gifted Jake his own interview segment, The Snake Pit, where he spoke in a low, deliberate whisper that forced the audience to lean forward in their seats. By late 1986, something fascinating happened. McMahon attempted to pivot Jake into a mega feud with Federation champion Hulk Hogan. But when Jake hit Hogan with the DDT during a Snake Pit segment, the crowd erupted not with outrage, but with rhythmic, ecstatic chants of DDT. The audience refused to hate this elegant monster. McMahon quietly scrapped the program, inadvertently costing Jake the most profitable run of his career. Forced to officially embrace his status as a fan favorite, Jake entered a heated personal rivalry with the Honky Tonk Man, who shattered a guitar across Jake's neck and genuinely fractured bones, forcing bookers to cancel plans for an intercontinental title run. WrestleMania 3 followed, with shock rocker Alice Cooper in Jake's corner. Then came Rick Rude, who made the catastrophic mistake of selecting Jake's real-life wife Cheryl from the crowd for his post-match kiss. She refused, revealed who she was, and slapped him. What began as a humiliation became one of 1988's most compelling feuds. From Rude, Jake transitioned into a program with Andre the Giant, exploiting a storyline snake phobia to terrorize the massive Frenchman. Behind the curtain, Andre initially tested Jake by no-selling his offense in their first house show match, waiting to see if the younger man would run to management or confront him directly. Jake confronted him. Andre respected him for it instantly. Two men who understood, in their bones, the language of dominance and survival. By 1990, Jake's physical ailments began catching up with him. A reality incorporated into a classic feud with the $1 Million Man over the $1 Million Championship, culminating at WrestleMania 6. The blindfold match against Rick Martel at WrestleMania 7 followed, a piece of pure theatrical absurdity that somehow worked entirely because of Jake's commitment to making the audience believe every second of it. Then, in the summer of 1991, the darkness that birthed Jake Roberts could no longer be suppressed. In a series of macabre vignettes, he turned on the Ultimate Warrior, luring him through a series of psychological trials before revealing his true allegiance alongside The Undertaker and Paul Bearer. Standing over the wreckage, Jake uttered the line that defined his entire career, and perhaps his entire life. "I'm a snake. Never trust a snake." What followed was his most visceral feud, against Randy Savage. In a shocking television moment, Jake tied a helpless Savage into the ropes and allowed a de-venomized king cobra to latch onto his arm. The snake held. The blood was real. The camera held on it longer than it should have. At a subsequent pay-per-view against Savage, Jake delivered his DDT 3 consecutive times after the match had already ended, then turned and slapped Miss Elizabeth across the face. The angle had to be terminated when Elizabeth's real family expressed genuine distress. Even in fiction, Jake Roberts had a way of making the damage spill over into the real world. By 1992, after putting over The Undertaker at WrestleMania 8, his relationship with the Federation collapsed over a broken promise of a creative writing position. He demanded his release, jumped to World Championship Wrestling, and watched a lucrative contract evaporate the moment Bill Watts, an old enemy from Mid-South, took over management. His salary fell from millions to almost nothing overnight. After a strange run culminating in a coal miner's glove match against Sting at Halloween Havoc, he departed into a nomadic wilderness of independent bookings, international tours, and accelerating decline. He returned to the Federation in 1996 as a born-again Bible-preaching figure carrying a new albino python named Revelations. At the King of the Ring that year, injured and limited, he made the finals against a rising Texan named Steve Austin. The match was a quick squash, but Austin's post-match promo, mocking Jake's scripture with the words, "Austin 3:16 says I just whipped your ass," became the founding document of the Attitude Era. The birth of the next generation of wrestling was built directly on the broken back of Jake Roberts' redemption story. The years that followed were a well-documented descent. The alcohol, the cocaine, the 1999 Heroes of Wrestling pay-per-view, where Jake arrived so intoxicated he could barely stand, using his snake as a grotesque prop in front of a few hundred bewildered fans. The man who had once made 20,000 people go quiet through sheer force of controlled menace was barely upright in a minor league arena in Mississippi. The cycle that began in a house in Gainesville, Texas, the cycle of a child with no safety, no protection, and no one coming, had never fully been broken. But it did not end there. Through the sustained, committed friendship of Diamond Dallas Page, Jake Roberts rebuilt himself. The documentary The Resurrection of Jake the Snake captured what that process actually looked like. Not triumphant, not clean, but real. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame on April 5, 2014. Standing at that podium, he said the induction was less about the wrestling and more about healing between a man and his family. He will turn 71 years old on May 30th, 2026. He is still here. Grizzly Smith died on June 12, 2010, in Amarillo, Texas. 77 years old. His biological son, Richard, the child he had given up for adoption, the one who perhaps escaped the worst of it, was his sole caretaker at the end. By all accounts, Grizzly Smith went to his grave without offering a single apology. Not to Jake, not to Robin, not to Sam, not to anyone. The true monster in this story never stepped into the ring beneath the bright lights of WrestleMania, never held a major championship, never starred in a pay-per-view watched by millions of people. His children did all of those things. They did them while carrying everything he had given them, which was damage and silence, and the knowledge that the world is not safe. Jake just happened to be the one who turned it into art.